This is how to do watercolors. Now we have two choices here. And if you remember in 3rd and 4th grade when we were doing watercolors, we talked a lot about wet on dry and wet on wet. And this is obviously your typical watercolor box. And you'll notice we start with red and the warm colors. We go to the cool colors, green, blue, and violet. And we have brown and black. Now these are the two colors we're probably not going to be using today. And they're kind of hard to use anytime. So I'm going to move this over. And we're going to talk about how to do wet on dry. Wet on dry means the paper is dry, but obviously I'm using water, which is wet. So if I had this triangle I was going to paint, if I was doing wet on dry and I want to try to make this one even coat of red, this is what I would do. I'd get my water and I'd get it already in the red paint, and I'd be making enough red paint over here on this side of the tray so that I can paint this whole triangle. So I believe I got enough going right here. So what I'm going to do, I'm holding this card or this paper at an angle, and there's a reason for that. Paint will only go where the paper is wet. So when I draw paint on here, I've loaded up this brush and I have a lot of paint on this piece of paper, but because I'm holding it at an angle, I'm getting this nice puddle right here that I can pull down. Now while I pull it down, I'm keeping the paint exactly the same color all the way at the top, and it's looking nice and neat. So as I pull down the puddle and I need more paint, I can go back to my tray, load up my brush again, and keep on pulling it down. If I lay my piece of paper down and try to paint it, all the water and paint will go anywhere where the paper is wet. So if I hold it this way, I'll get the nice puddle because the paint won't go any further because the paper is dry. So by the time I get this all the way down and I go across and I make my puddle, I get to the very end of my triangle, I could end up with an extra puddle at the very bottom that I need to get rid of. And this is super easy because once you get down to the bottom, all you have to do is dry your brush. And if your brush is dry, if you run it along the bottom, it will take up or suck up all the extra paint at the bottom. Alright, now I have a perfect shade of red. It's all perfectly even, and you won't have that problem with watercolors where one part looks real dark and one part looks lighter. Now, the neat thing about watercolors also is you can leave this alone. If you leave it dry for about 10 minutes, you can come back and put another color right over top. And this part will be red, this part will be yellow, and the yellow, when it goes over top of the red, will become orange. So, because watercolors are translucent, you can see through them, you can add color on top of color, which is really neat. Now, the other thing you got to worry about watercolors is, I don't want to paint anywhere near this. If I'm painting, I want to paint someplace over here if I don't want the colors to run. That's wet on dry. Now wet on wet's a lot different. What we do is get the paper wet, and when the paper is very wet and saturated a little bit, you can come back and you can add a color on top. And when you add that color on top, it's going to run, but it only runs where the paper is wet. Now that's cool because you can move it by shifting your paper where the water is, but the weird part is you can do all kinds of neat things, but you don't have a lot of control. So even when you drop other colors, you're not exactly sure how they're going to mix or how they're going to look when they get done. Now you're going to notice I'm only using the warm colors over here. My warm colors are red, yellow, and orange, the three over here on the watercolor. I can't mix my cool colors with my warm colors because if you look at the color wheel, which is on my wall, you will notice that they're opposite on the color wheel. Colors that are opposite on the color wheel, when they touch or mix, they always make the color gray. So when you're watercoloring, you have to be worried about this. You try to either keep with your warm colors or your cool colors. Okay, so what you just saw here was an example of how to watercolor with wet on dry paper, wet paper, and wet paint.